Well, thank you. Good afternoon. This is Kim Hutchinson. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Farmers Market Association, and I'd like to welcome you to our Lunch and Learn series. It is with great pleasure that we bring this series to you in partnership with the Cooperative Extension. Rachel and Sarah have been just fantastic and a wealth of information and knowledge in being able to provide tools and resources for all of our market managers, vendors, producers, farmers, et cetera, that have an interest in being able to strengthen their business. The Virginia Farmers Market Association is an organization that works with Virginia's over 356 farmers markets to promote not only education, training, and resources, but also to provide the tools that help make farmers markets sustainable. This is an ongoing training program for our organization. We thank you for participating, and I hope that we will see you at our annual conference, which is November 13th to the 15th in Stanton, where we dive very deeply into multiple topics that will impact you as market managers, as farmers, producers, giving you a wealth of connections and tools on both the big picture of agriculture, farming, and farmers markets in Virginia, as well as the details of how to continue to be successful. So again, it's with great pleasure that I welcome you, and I turn this over to Rachel.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kim and Mary, for putting this all together. And everyone that's participating now or after this has been recorded, watching it later. I'm super excited to talk to you guys today about pricing. If you didn't already watch the webinar that I did on budgeting, I would definitely do so because some of that information helps you figure out your pricing. And also Sarah's discussion and presentation on marketing. So knowing who your customer is, where, all of that stuff, especially if you're participating in two different farmers markets or also then direct selling to restaurants or other places, those prices are not always going to be the same. So understanding what your costs are, who your customer is, all of that stuff. So a little bit too about myself, if you didn't already know, I'm the Ag Extension Agent in Powhatan County, which is south of the James River, just west of Richmond. I grew up in Hanover County, which is north of the river, Goochland, same, which was the two counties. And I went to Virginia Tech, did an undergrad degree in animal science with an emphasis on livestock production business, and also received a bachelor's from the Agriculture and Applied Economic department in agribusiness management, and love the numbers side of things. But also love the people and doing the work and working with the animals, plants, all of that. So I definitely think that pricing and budgeting, the numbers part is not always the fun part for folks, but it can also be one of the most rewarding parts when you understand your business and you have your business flowing in a way that it's not fly by the seat of your pants, and you know what to expect and have more control, can expect and bounce back from hard times a lot easier than folks that are just kind of rolling along and don't know what's going on until they might be in a real bad pickle. So this outline is just going to show us what we're going to walk through. I'm going to say one little thing about things to remember. We're going to go over some ways to price your product, and then we're going to go through some examples of different ways to price your product. So things to remember, as Sarah talked about in the marketing, identifying your market need is really important. If there's not a need, but you think it's a need, you might feel very passionate about it, that's wonderful. I would definitely say find other people, your customers, that agree with you that that is a need, because those are going to be the people that are buying. It's a whole lot easier to find them and not sell and convince someone that they must buy your product if you are going to those and marketing towards those customers. Obviously, food is always a need, but sometimes different types of food people might not be familiar with, or different things like that. So grow or produce your products that satisfy a market need. So making sure, again, that you're figuring that out before you get started, or even if you're looking to start down a different enterprise, so you want to try a different crop out, there's a lot of opportunities for taste testing and getting consumer feedback at farmers markets, which is awesome. sell at a price your customers are willing and able to pay. And, different areas are value things differently, have different economics that go along with it. I think Sarah talked about this, if you're going to sell in Times Square in New York City, you're going to get a different price than if you're selling in Southside Virginia. It might be the same product, it might have the same cost associated with it to some extent, but some of the other marketing, land rentals, different things like that might be very different. Most importantly, you want it to return a profit to the business. We're all doing this probably because you love it, but the money is also a good thing to keep your houses functioning and to keep you able to put food on your table. So you want to make sure that's returning a profit to the business, or at least trying to figure out that you're not going too far in the hole if it's just a hobby that you want. One thing that I heard in a presentation that I thought was really important too is understanding that if you're doing this as a hobby and other people that you're also competing against, whether it's at your farmer's market or elsewhere, are not doing it as a hobby and their livelihood depends on it, you owe yourself and them to do your due diligence on researching and understanding your pricing so that you're not going to outcompete those that are actually understanding their costs associated with production and need to make that price to put food on their table. So I'm all for people that want to make, to produce and do something as a hobby, but it's just as important for you to understand your costs so that you're not undercutting those that are trying to make their livelihood on producing these products. You can also think that if you don't want to charge that much and take that money home, you could pair up with a nonprofit and donate that money to help support some other organizations in need. Also remember that pricing is not a decision you only make once. If it's a decision you make only once, then you're not being a smart business owner and understanding your costs, because costs do not stay stagnant as much as we would love them to. We're not in control of all of our inputs for our products. So make sure that you're revisiting this often. So some ways to price your products. We have cost-based pricing, competition-based pricing, and customer-based pricing. I want to make note that most business owners will use some combination of these. So you're not going to necessarily just use one. You kind of have to be in touch with what your competitors are doing. You need to understand who your customers are and what they're willing and able to pay for your products. And then definitely need to understand your costs. So I'm gonna, if anyone can like raise your hand on, I think that's an option on here, or you can type in the chat if you feel like you've used any of these different ways to price before. You can say yes, no, or you just realized that you might have used it.
Okay, I think I've got this. This is the first time I've done this, so bear with me. I've used cost-based pricing. That's primarily what I use.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a very small preserve company. I make French method preserves. I'm the only one in my entire area that does this. So I've tried to base all of my pricing on cost base.
Awesome.
It is a hobby. However, it has to be self-sustaining. And so produce is expensive, renting the market stall, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty much what I base everything on. So I think I'm doing it right.
Awesome. Well, we'll walk through a little bit and I'll hopefully give you some tools to just double check everything, if not just to food for thought.
Okay, that'll be perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else doing any of this, or we're here to learn? I hope that's a big case or a refresher. So ways to price your product: cost base. As the lovely woman, I'm sorry I didn't get your name, said.
My name's Lisa.
Lisa. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, that's okay.
So some advantages: your pricing is going to then be backed up by your actual cost of doing business, so not your best guess, which is awesome. A lot of folks just actually pull a number out of thin air, but actually a lot of times they're looking at competition, they might say, oh, you know, actually at the store it was this price, so I think I'm going to pull that. But cost base is so important because then you actually know you're covering your costs, because ultimately you need to cover your costs if you want to make a profit. Some disadvantages, if you have a new product and you have a lot of startup costs, your new product might not compete well with established brands if those are included. So your cost might be a whole lot more than those businesses that have been around for a long time. They've kind of paid off a lot of their heavy investment equipment that they might have.
Yeah.
What area you're in to be able to get that done. So that could, if you're strictly doing it like that. Competition, like I said, some folks don't even realize that they're actually using a little bit of research of, hey, in the grocery store, I saw stuff selling for this price, so that's where I'm going to go with my price. So that is important, doing a little bit of research. And then your new products, if they're priced lower than your competitor's price, prices may increase your sales. So if you price it low, then you might get more sales, which could end up being more profit in the long run, just not as profitable per unit, if that makes sense. Some disadvantages, you're not looking at your costs, so you might not be covering all your costs. And like similar before, startup businesses might have more cost associated with their production than established businesses. And so looking at their price might not give you a great grasp on what your profit is going to be compared to theirs. And then offering a low new price and then raising it later can confuse customers as to what they're getting and why it's changing and all of that. So you have to look at some of those things. And then customer base, using your price to support your product image. If you want to go with a higher quality, look for folks that are willing to spend more dollars on their products, then your price can help reflect some of that. You can set your price to increase your product sales, again, using like a lower price, oftentimes can help do that. And then designing a price range to attract many consumer groups. So that's important when you look at if you want to do some bundling also. So price bundle of products to reduce inventory or to excite customers. So some folks actually like to buy in bulk. They want to go grocery shopping once or twice a month to plan out their meals. And so they might appreciate, think of folks that might have memberships at like Sam's or Costco, and they will go and get things in bulk because it's a smaller price per unit overall usually. And so they're going to do that to save money in the long term because they're going to be able to pre-plan out, especially if it's non-perishable or they have large families that need to eat a lot of food. And then you want to set your price to increase your volume sales. If you have wholesale customers as well as selling at the market, those prices are going to be completely different. And then so that's important to see who your customer is and pricing it. Again, you might lose track of what your costs are, and you may forget about competition and what everyone else is doing. So we're going to look mostly at cost-based pricing. So know your cost. I cannot emphasize that enough. And so that's where looking at the budgeting webinar that I did on budgeting, whether it's for a specific enterprise or it's looking at the whole farm unit, is really important so that you know what goes into your production. So we have two different types of costs that we look at. Variable costs, which increase in direct proportion to the number of units sold. So if it costs you a cent per label, that's going to directly increase the more products you sell because you need more labels. And so we often refer to that as cost of goods sold. And I put the COGS in parentheses because a lot of times you'll see it abbreviated. And these costs include like ingredients, supplies like your fertilizer, seed, labor associated with it, packaging, sales commissions, and utilities. Fixed costs, they remain fairly constant regardless of how many items you sell. So these are things like your building rent or your farm rent, or rent at a commercial kitchen space, loan payments, insurance, utilities, depreciation, and taxes. Now you'll notice that I put utilities in both areas. Why would I do that? There's a lot of arguments about utilities, and so it really depends on you and your operation. If you have large equipment that draws a lot of energy and you only use that for one of your enterprises, then you more than likely might have that excess amount of utility bill attached as a variable cost to this product. Now, it depends on how nitty gritty you want to get. If you don't want to get nitty gritty like that, then you can go and just stick it in your fixed costs and say, I'm paying this bill no matter what. And so it just depends on how detail oriented you want to get in understanding all of your costs. So I put that there. That's really up to you guys on how you want to do that. So how much do you want to return to the business after all your expenses are paid? That's essentially what part of this pricing equation is going to tell us. So we have to decide what we want to have as a gross margin. So this is the percent of income resulting from sales of a product after paying the cost of goods sold. So I put some industry standards on here that a lot of this information, and I'll have a resource page linked like we did with the last one of different publications from different extension services across the nation. But these are some industry standards that we kind of see for fresh produce, value-added, shelf-stable items, and baked goods. The higher percentage gross margin kind of reflects the perishability of your items. So that helps kind of cover the loss of some of those items when they're not going to get sold as quickly, whereas your value-added or shelf-stable items can sit on the shelf for a longer period of time than your fresh produce and baked goods. So we also look at gross profit. So this is the dollar amount, not a percentage, but the dollar amount of total sales minus your total expenses. So a lot of times we talk about our profit and how many dollars we get, and then our margin would be how much the percentage of that. So this is our total revenue equals our units sold times our price per unit minus our total cost, which equals our units sold times the cost per unit. Oftentimes, we will also have higher gross margin to be able to account for our fixed costs and profit. So not just profit, but our fixed costs, because it's hard to break down fixed costs to a per unit cost. So when in this slide, we have total costs is our unit sold times our cost per unit. And it's very hard sometimes to figure that out, what that price is going to be based on how many units we sell. And so that's part of the equations that we're trying to figure out too. So this could be a best estimate that for this example down here, we're going to talk about sweet corn that we're going to sell $2 ears, and we're going to include our variable costs. We're doing a calculation to look at gross profit based on 100 ears sold. So in this example, you could say, okay, there's 100 ears sold, and I know what my total fixed costs are, and you could divide that by the amount that you sold and figure out what it is per unit. But fixed costs is going to change based on how many units you sold, whereas your variable cost is per unit. I hope that makes sense. So in this example, we look at gross profit. We're going to guess that we're going to sell, or we did sell 100 units, so 100 ears, times the $2 per ear price that we have on it, minus our total cost, which we had 100 ears, and our variable cost we're saying was $1.25 per ear. So that gives us $75 profit. Now we're going to look at a cost margin based pricing. So we talked about the profit before to look at what our profit would be. So we want to figure out our variable cost of production again and fixed costs. So I put N fixed costs in there because we want to always make sure that we're covering that. But like I said before, a lot of times we'll include a higher percentage of desired gross margin to be able to cover that fixed cost and incorporate our profit. So this calculation is to find out our selling price, we've got our cost of goods sold divided by essentially the percentage of our cost. So 100 minus our desired gross margin. So for our example for sweet corn again, we've got our variable cost of $1.25 per ear divided by 100 minus 40% desired gross margin. So that will give us a selling price of $2.08. So that gets back to why in the profit calculation, I was looking at $2 per ear. Break evens. These are very fun to work with and very important because you might be curious of how much of a product you need to sell to cover your fixed and variable costs and break even, essentially no profit. So if you need to just make sure all of your bills are paid, what do you need to do? So this looks at total revenues and total costs. And here's a quick little equation, but I'm going to kind of break it down, move it around so you can look at our selling price and our volume. So this is the minimum price you can sell your product for and still cover your costs. So oftentimes we need to figure out that. So we're going to look at our total fixed costs divided by our volume of production plus our variable cost per unit. If I'm going too fast too. And Travis, sorry, I just saw that you said in the chat, you're getting $2 per ear of corn. This was just strictly an example. Sometimes I want to keep you on your toes. So in this example for our sweet corn, I'm sorry guys, this is just strictly an example, just using pulling some numbers. I feel like we use tomatoes a lot and I started to do that and I was like, no, I'm going to use sweet corn today and be all over the place. So we're going to say that, again, our variable costs are $1.25 per ear. We're going to guess that we're going to sell 500 of them. And our fixed costs, so that's all of our rent, insurance, taxes, all of that is $2,000. Now, we take our total fixed costs and we're going to divide that by the quantity we sold and add in our variable costs to give us what is our break-even selling price. What do we need to sell them for to make no profit, cover our bills? And in this equation, you'll see $5.25 per ear. Holy moly, yikes. If you thought $2, Travis, was a lot, $5.25. So this is a good eye-opener to say, wow, I am not able to cover all of my fixed costs and all of my costs. And I'm definitely not able to sell them for $5.25 a year. So we might need to make some changes, whether it's you need to sell more or you need to get your variable costs down. We need to look at our fixed costs. And that fixed cost, you might think also is all of your costs for the entire farm. And this is just one small enterprise. So maybe breaking it down across all enterprises and saying, okay, I have 5 enterprises, so I only need to have a fifth of my fixed costs covered by this enterprise. Just depends on how you want to do it. So in this example, you would probably or definitely be able to cover your variable costs, but your fixed costs definitely are not able to be covered. All right, so then we can look at sales volume. How much of your product that you will need to produce to sell to cover your total cost of production. So we looked at what do we need to price it at to cover all of our costs with a guesstimate of how much we're going to produce. And now we can look at how much do we need to produce to cover all of our costs. So these both ways are really good to look at, and I would say that you need to throw numbers in there and change it around. Increase the quantity, decrease the quantity. Increase the price, decrease the price. Or if you feel 100% like you cannot go any lower with price or you can't go any higher with price, then that will also help you figure out then what your volume needs to be. Sorry guys, my throat was getting dry. So we'll look at total fixed costs divided by our selling price minus our variable cost a unit. So again, our example, we're doing our total fixed cost of $2,000 divide it by the price of the ear of corn, which is $2 minus our variable cost per ear, which is $1.25. So that's $2,000 divided by 75 cents is going to give us 2,667 ears of corn that we need to sell to break even and cover all of our costs. So that's definitely a lot larger number than the 500, but that's with us staying at $2 per ear. I hope those made sense on the different ways to look at pricing based on your break even. Does anybody have any questions about that? I'll let you guys either phone chat or type in chat.
Rachel.
Yes.
Hey, this is Lisa again. I've got a question for you. My costs really vary dramatically over a season. It's it's like at the beginning of the year, it's like when I purchase, like, let's say my fruits, like berries are outrageously expensive.
Right.
And then when I get into like my fall season, like right now, pineapples, oranges, apples, very inexpensive. And I get a ton of, I get so much more production. I mean, berries make small quantities. They're very expensive, but it seems like this is my first year doing this, and it seems like I'm balancing out. It's like, even though my profit margin may not be as high with the berries, once I get into the fall and it's apples, pineapples, oranges, etc., my profit margin is much larger. So I'm balancing out over the year, it appears, so far. So is that okay to do? Because it seems like people are paying, whether it's berries or peaches, my customers seem to be perfectly happy to pay what I'm asking, regardless of what the fruit is.
Right.
So, I mean, so that's going to be okay.
Yeah, and it's especially since you have a shelf-stable product and you're kind of the only one, you said, that's doing it.
Yeah.
In fresh market, you see those prices change a whole lot more as supply increases. The price is going to go down.
Correct.
To stay competitive, and so you probably don't see that fluctuation as much with your product, even though you see your costs are going all over the place.
Yeah, they do. They just go everywhere. My husband's an accountant, so he's like going, "This is driving me nuts." And I'm like, don't pay any attention to it. Trust me, I'll show you everything at the end of the year. You know,
right?
And then you can see. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, and that's like, this is your first year, you said, so you're trying to figure that out. And could you imagine if you were, well, I mean, if some people do change their prices throughout the year based on what their costs are, and so you can do that. That might drive your customers crazy. So I don't know. You have to live with your husband, but
he butts out. I've told him to go away.
Okay. But that's really good that you're understanding your costs. And I would say look at it. You can look at it seasonally, but you could also look at it over the season and try to figure out how it is. And then you can start doing some different analysis in there, like sensitivity analysis to show like how much, if your price changes or your costs, if your costs are changing, how much that's going to affect your profitability. And you'll now have like a kind of an idea of what your inventory that comes in and out and your sales are going to be.
Right.
So you need to tweak some of your prices to kind of cover you over a longer span. Say, you know, you make most profit in the fall per item, but what if something happens and you couldn't sell in the fall? You need to make sure that you're like able to cover costs otherwise. So like you can do some different things kind of to average it out across the whole season. And that definitely takes some like finagling. And that's why I always say like throw different numbers in here all the time. Also give you kind of a better idea. So
Okay.
Unrealistic numbers are not going to be helpful other than to look at and maybe dream or be depressed, whichever way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It seems
these
like
equations you got to mess with a lot. And then that kind of helps you see too, like, okay, well, I definitely need to, if I'm doing it at this price, I definitely need to sell this many. Or if I'm going to only sell this many, I need to be able to get this price, or however you want to.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like right now my pricing has been pretty good. And I've also been doing some bulk pricing, like you get 3 jars this much. Yeah. And everybody's like, oh, do you have a deal on 2 jars? And I said, nope, it's either 1 jar or 3 jars, no in between.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
good. And that might really entice them to just buy the 3rd one.
They do. And they're very happy. So, I mean, I've got my little following now. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, I'd say just depending on like what product, and this can't always work for every single product, but
exactly.
Sometimes, pricing it at something that is attractive that people will pay for, you will have more products move than having them stagnant. And that's really important if you have fresh produce or perishables.
Right.
Also, if you have a story to tell and your product is different, or something, you can tell that story, then you can justify why your pricing is higher or different. Then that's also important. Teresa Nartea, which is one of our extension specialists at VSU, she does a lot of fun things on marketing and just different ways of even showing your customers the price. So if someone else is doing by pound, you could do by item. And it might actually be the same or might be slightly higher, but those sorts of things. And you were bundling. Like those things are great, and not that you're trying to trip your customers up at all, just setting yourself apart and trying to make sure that you're making what you need.
And it seems like I've got customers that'll buy 1 jar, and then they buy 1 jar, and then they come back like next week and they buy 3. I've got some customers that'll buy 6 or 9 jars at a time. So it seems to be, because it's not a huge discount, but I think it's enough that it makes it attractive and it gives people variety. So
definitely.
Anyway, okay, cool. All right, then I'm on the right track.
Yeah, and if you didn't watch the budgeting, or
I would love. Yeah, I missed it.
Yeah,
like it's crazy. I've got lots of grandchildren, so
totally understand that.
Yeah. So they take priority sometimes.
Good. Well, does anybody else have any other questions or specific questions? I know this was really short. It was kind of, I didn't know how far down to go with the analysis and all that. There's plenty of other resources. Those equations, if anyone's somewhat comfortable with Excel or needs help with Excel, you can put those into your enterprise budget, which is awesome because you change numbers in your enterprise budget, and then it will show you your break even, either volume or price, however you want, to figure out based on what the numbers you're putting in, which is awesome. And that's where it makes me really happy to be able to do that and not have to handwrite every single thing. But if you're in these equations will work perfect as well.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Absolutely fantastic, Rachel. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just, for me, like I said, what I do, it's like I'm the only one in the area that does this. And I do really, really high-end presentation. And the first year, it's like there hasn't been a lot of profit because I've had to buy everything.
Yep.
But I think
educate
and educate myself, and oh my gosh, yes. And learning how to make this stuff. I've been doing it for 40 years, so that's not a big deal. But finding like my produce sources, because I only source locally within 100-mile radius, and
awesome.
I try to be really, really careful about what I do. So this, at least I'm on the right track. And
yes,
this has been awesome.
Great.
Is there any way that I can get any information on the budgeting and marketing? Because I did miss those meetings.
Yes. So those are all on the Virginia Farmers Market Association website. There's links to the webinar recordings. And then I also supplied Kim and Mary with a sheet that has links to other publications, written publications that I've gathered information into. So those will all be on their website.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll share
Awesome.
a link to that again, Lisa.
Okay.
For everybody, I'll be sending out an email with links to this recording if anybody wants to watch it again, as well as links to the past recordings. And I'll also share an evaluation form to give Rachel some feedback so that Cooperative Extension can plan for future sessions.
Okay.
Yeah. And does somebody else got another?
I was going to say,
Go ahead.
Travis had a quick question about what's the best option for calculating costs on a vegetable garden. Sorry, I'm in another office and their phone is ringing. Sorry. Okay. So that is really up to you, Travis. As I said before, like you could get really nitty gritty and with the utilities if you want to. I really like to understand things as a whole, but also individually to know if that crop is actually producing a profit that you want to see. And sometimes it's really eye-opening to see, wow, I did not even think this crop was going to go over well, and it's one of your highest profiting crops based on consumers like it, it's selling, and you're getting a really good profit margin because the inputs are really low. So I would definitely advocate for, if you can, do the whole garden separately as different enterprises for your break evens. And it can get kind of confusing if you're buying all your fertilizer in one heap, but then you should know probably like how much you're putting down for one crop versus the other, or if you're putting it across the whole thing, then you could just divvy that up by however many crops you have. Does that answer your question, Travis? So I hate to say it depends and it's up to you, but yeah, I personally would like to know what each one does. But if it gets too complicated and too confusing for you, then yeah, you could definitely do it like as a whole. What is this garden overall producing, and how are we kind of doing? It'll give you at least somewhat of an idea versus running any numbers on it at all. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you so much to the Virginia Farmers Market Association, Kim and Mary, for putting this on, and anyone that's participated now or in the future. And like I said, I'll be sending some resources to Mary to post on the website as well.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And I'll send those out tomorrow to everybody with the recording. And next Monday, Sarah Sharp will be back with a webinar on labeling, which is a big issue for market vendors. So please plan to tune into that. Thank you again, Rachel, and we'll see y'all next Monday.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
Hi.